Hi, my name is Denise Hurd, and welcome back to another episode of How They See Us. If you are tuning in for the first time, How They See Us is a conversation with people about how they are seen in the communities they work and that they live in. And if you are not new here, welcome back. I'm so glad that you're here with us and so glad that you can make it. Happy Women's History Month. It is Women's History Month, and this month is one of my favorites because we celebrate women and everything that we are. And, we as women have contributed so much to our world. But even with all the accomplishments that we've had and the lengthy resumes that we celebrate, some of us believe that our accomplishments are just pure luck, that we didn't really achieve them on our own, or we're not even deserving of the accolades that we receive. And we think that despite our education, our experience, and our work ethic, that we're just not worthy. And so, according to an article by Human Resource Director, 90% of female employees suffer from imposter syndrome. So today I wanted to take some time and I want to unpack imposter syndrome and discuss why self-doubt permeates women's personal and professional lives. It's something that I've suffered with myself. I know friends and colleagues that have suffered with it as well. So I just really think this is a very important conversation for us to have. And so I decided I need to invite two of my friends who are really focused on empowering women to have a conversation, because these are two badass women. I think I can say that here. These are two badass women that I've had the opportunity to work with and to talk with. I want to bring into this conversation Leslie Bailey and Amanda Kingsbury. They are the CEO and founders of MD Maven, and I want us to have a conversation about imposter syndrome. So, hey, ladies, how are you?
Hi, Denise.
Hello. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. It's so very important. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what you all have to say and having some real talk about this particular issue. So this is a conversation a question I'm going to float out to the two of you all, and anyone can pick it up first. Imposter syndrome has made many of us believe that we need to know more before we take a risk, like entrepreneurship. So as the founders of Indie Maven, did you all struggle with imposter syndrome during the early stages or early days of Indie Maven?
I think Leslie should answer this question because you know why? She stuck her neck out way further than I did when this company launched, because I had a full-time job at the time and it was my side gig.
Right. That's right. So Leslie, did you struggle at all in the beginning?
No, I think I still was under like some pregnancy hormones that I think like gave me some superpowers. And I've heard there are studies about like women being more creative in the first year after giving birth. And it was my first son. And I was like, yeah, I needed something that was not motherhood. And so I just don't think I thought through it enough to allow that to sneak in. It came later though.
It did come later?
Yeah.
So in the beginning, you were just totally oblivious.
Yeah, to like most things, right? It's like that haze of, I basically was like, okay, I kept this baby alive 1 year. That seems good. Maybe that gave me a little confidence, I don't know. It was like I was in such a haze. I didn't like think that much about it. It was very much like a leap then look.
I think that's cool because a lot of times if we don't think about it, we can just do it. But we spend so much time thinking about it that we sometimes think about it so much we talk ourselves out of it.
Right.
Which is imposter syndrome. So let me shift over to you, Amanda, because you said that, you were working when Indie Maven first started. And so, but let me ask you though, in the roles that you've had, because you've had some pretty amazing roles in your career. So has imposter syndrome ever impacted you professionally?
I was thinking about this. I don't think it's been chronic for me, and I have some ideas for why that's the case. But there was one job I had. I was hired as the travel editor at a newspaper in Texas. And I mean, it was debilitating for me. I felt such imposter syndrome that I left after 18 months. But I'll tell you why. And I realized how this is something that repeats in my life. I was working with a bunch of people who graduated from Ivy League schools, who were extremely well traveled and very cultured. I went to Ball State. I didn't even have a passport when I took this job, but the editor was like, "You are such a good writer and you have such good ideas. We need you to come here and remake our travel section." You know, right? So, I mean, and I did that, but I left after 18 months because I just never felt like I was good enough to be at that job. So yeah, that was the worst experience for me.
Wow. Any other areas where imposter syndrome has turned into a me versus me type battle for you professionally?
Not professionally. I would say by the time I got to the Indy Star, I was really aware of systemic biases, gender bias, racism, everything to do with hiring and pay and compensation, that I was like, this isn't me. This is a wider problem about fixing systems instead of fixing myself and other women in the room. Yeah.
Imposter syndrome is interesting because I think it wasn't until recently where we finally had an official name for it, you know. But I remember early in my career getting a phone call about a job, and the person calling said, "Hey, we have a position available at our agency and we're looking for someone who can do X, 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 and X." And the first thing I said was, "Okay, let me think about it and I'll give you some names." And then the person paused for a minute and said, "No, we were thinking about you." And so after we like me, and I remember after that conversation, I hung up the phone thinking about all the reasons why I wasn't qualified to do that job. You know, all the reasons. In fact, my reasons why I wasn't qualified outweighed all the reasons why, which this person had told me why they were calling me.
Right.
It's crazy. But interestingly, I ended up taking the job and had a very, very successful career. So I'm so glad I didn't let imposter syndrome take over. But yeah, it's a tough one because it can really be a career blocker and also block you personally.
Can I bring one thing you said? So I was doing a little bit of research because this is funny. My sister last night was like, "Are you watching the IU game?" I'm like, "No, I'm hyper researching for an interview tomorrow about imposter syndrome." If that's not ironic, I don't know what is, right? So the term actually came about in 1978.
Really?
So this was the year Grease came out, and like Space Invaders was the top video game. So let's put that into context in the Wayback Machine. 2 women psychologists from Oberlin College, but they didn't call it syndrome. They called it a phenomenon because, again, they were reporting on women's experiences. They were not trying to give them a disorder to internalize.
Wow.
So the history is quite fascinating. And then all of a sudden women started taking it in this other direction over the past several decades.
Only we would do that, right?
Right, exactly.
Only we would do that.
So it's been around for a while. It's just that I think social media has made it much more prevalent.
Yeah, good point. Good point. So let me ask you, Leslie, you wear a lot of hats, and even a lot of hats in the course of one day.
Yeah.
And so how do you overcome or deal with imposter syndrome, both personally and professionally?
I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the host asked her guest, who was a man, and said, a lot of my audience, it was Donald Miller, who does like building a story brand, right? Big marketing brain. And he was coming at it from a perspective. And she said, well, a lot of my audience deals with something different because my audience is mostly women. And, we have a unique experience as women. And I can't remember which one, I think it was him, or maybe it was her that said this, but they made the point of when you become a mother, or if somebody becomes a mother, you don't get imposter syndrome, right? You just do the best you can. Now we even do sort of weave it in there a little bit, but are other people doing better than me? But for the most part, your job is to do your job. Your job is to keep this child or children alive, healthy, happy, successful, hopefully one day, right? You don't get so much in your head about it. I think, yes, we have pressures of, am I doing the best I can do, or those sorts of things, but never am I the right person to do this? This is you. You're the mom. That's right. Of course you are, right? And so I think we get in a little bit of our heads of nobody goes back. And yeah, you can say, you know, my mom could have done a better job or whatever. But then at the end of the day, you say, they were my mom. She did the best she could with what she had. And so I sort of just apply that to everything of I just do the best I can with what I have. And it's not always going to be perfect or right, but it's all I have. It's all we have. So I don't, this concept of like, there's this thing about lately that goes around about, you know, men will make sure that they only have 50% or 60%, whatever. I did not research like Amanda did. Okay. But, you know, that when men apply for a job, right, they will only meet X percent of the criteria, where women feel they need to meet 100%. I just think at this point, I know I don't have 100% of anything. So I just have to give what is available. I think when you wear a lot of hats, it just becomes that, right? Like I'm going to show up, I'm going to do my best, but I don't have a lot of other time or energy to dive to pour into that.
Right. That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Amanda, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I was just thinking, I mean, Leslie, you're very wise. You always have been. And I wish I knew what you knew at your age. I'm not even sure, I can't even speak, but you know what I'm saying. However much younger you are, I wish I knew back then what you know. But I was thinking when I applied for my arts council job, I was looking at the job description and I actually didn't apply for it because I was like, I'm not qualified for this. And I got heavily recruited by my boss. And even in the interview, I sat there and I said, there's no one person who can do all of this. They don't exist. Here's what I can do. Here's what I would need help with. And she was like, okay, cool. And that was the first time I think I admitted that so openly, because I was like, I don't want these expectations on me. Nobody can do this job the way it's written, the way it is right now.
So you said something really important. Like you shared a little bit, you let somebody peek behind the curtain. You know, you didn't try and present something that you knew you could not be. And so wouldn't you think that as a collective, that's like one of the first steps to addressing imposter syndrome, is to keep it real with yourself, but not be apprehensive in sharing what you may or may not be able to do. It's not that you're faking it at all. It's just that you're owning what you can own, but then asking for help for everything else.
Right. It's like when Leslie was just talking about having a baby. You don't go into it thinking you know everything. You know it's going to be a learning process, you know. My daughter's learning to drive right now. She's got something that says student driver on the back of our car, you know, so everyone else can know around us, hey, be nice to her. She's learning and she's new at this. Why can't we all just take that throughout our lives? Hey, this is a whole new career for me. I'm new at this, you know. Why can't I just admit that there's a lot that I need to learn? I hate fake it till you make it. I think
hate that phrase.
The worst advice you can give somebody, actually.
Yeah. I agree. I think that phrase creates so much anxiety within someone. And you want to talk about imposter, you know, because you are faking it rather than keeping it 100. I agree.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and to that end too, Amanda, thank you for that compliment. But I am who I am because women like Amanda, and specifically Amanda, played a major part in like mentoring me. When I started at the Star, I don't know this for a fact, but I was probably one of the only people in the room as a reporter that did not go to journalism school. And that was really got in my head at some point. Again, I lapped and went into it, not thinking about it. But then as you're sitting in the room and it came later and I thought, oh my God, I am totally not qualified to be here, but Amanda saw something in me and she thought that I was, right? So I think it's like making sure that we know too, having that, whether it's saying, hey, nobody can meet these expectations, or just having that open dialogue, whether that's with a potential employer, a friend, a colleague, like that, you say keeping it real, like that's what keeps it is. But if we don't talk about it, then it just creates those barriers.
But how do you handle imposter syndrome when it's not like environmental, or it's not like a job that you're applying for, a position that you hold? Maybe it's a perspective in the community. I remember years ago, I received an award, and when I was walking up on stage to receive the award, I was thinking, oh my gosh, a big screen is going to come down and it's going to say imposter, you know, and that, you know, and that was a me versus me moment. And so how do we address those imposter syndrome moments that's really you fighting with yourself?
Let me know when you find out.
I know, right?
The only thing we can do is listen to each other and help each other clear up the delusions we have about ourselves. Leslie, Denise, I hear you're saying this, but the evidence is this. Where is this disconnect? And you know what? There are things, I don't know if it's always us versus us or me versus me. Because again, early family dynamics play into this. There are so many reasons, you know, the way we're wired. It's really hard to point to one thing. But I think putting a mirror up to somebody and saying, this is how, you know, I see you. But again, Leslie and you and I talked about this too. Just because somebody sees you one way doesn't mean you feel that way inside.
Right.
Yeah.
True.
And I think with success or accolades or any of those things, that can almost make it worse, because somebody's saying you're doing such a good job, and you're like, you need to see what is happening behind this curtain, because it is not pretty. It is such a mess.
It's like the duck gliding across the water, but underneath their little feet.
Underneath. I used that exact same thing to somebody recently. And I have tried personally. I don't know if I tried or if I just sort of like had a little public meltdown a few weeks ago on Instagram. But I just remember thinking, if one more person tells me what a good job I'm doing, I'm going to lose it, because I'm not. And it also, I think, allows people to think sometimes that you don't need the support. Right. So that makes you feel like a total imposter when the whole world's telling you you're doing a great job, and you feel like a disaster behind the scenes. Like those two things don't add up together. And it's really hard to sort of meld those perspectives.
That's a good point. Let me ask you something, because I asked you earlier, Leslie, and I mean, I'm going to open this up to you as well. I think this is something you both can address. You all wear a lot of hats, you know, from business owner to moms to, you know, spouses to parents to this. I mean, all these hats that you all wear and that women wear, period, over the course of the day. You know, you talk about all the different wardrobe changes you make over the course of the day with respect to your hats. Do you think that the fact that we have to wear so many hats and juggle so many balls, that contributes or feeds into imposter syndrome? You know, you wake up in the morning and you're one thing, an hour later you're something else.
Well, I think it's just hard to keep track, right? So who am I in this? And I think that's why it's important to actually know who you are and try and be consistent, you know, at least hold the same values throughout the day. I think consistency is really important. Know who you are and what's important to you. And then it doesn't matter so much what hat you're wearing, because you're still you. The rest of you is you. Like your hat's changing, but your brain and your heart and everything that really matters is still you.
But how do I connect with that? You know, sometimes that's easier said than done. So if I have to connect with who I am and know who I am, but I wear all these different hats, how do I work through that to help minimize the effects of imposter syndrome?
I think it's an annoying answer, but I think it's like making space for yourself. So I think we, you know, have talked about the whole self-care thing, and knowing now that's so much deeper than the surface stuff. But this morning I woke up and I was like, I'm not going to make it through this week if I don't carve out a day that is for me. It's not going to happen, because I can't even think straight. So I think, you know, it's carving, which is it's easier said than done, right? Because you're like, well, if I'm already strapped for time, how am I going to find the time? But it's like one of those things that if you put the work in on the front end, it's going to pay off on the back end.
That makes sense.
Amanda, I'm not an entrepreneur, so I don't have the pressure that you both have, right? Because this week, I'm going to be a good daughter. I'm going to go up and take care of my mom because she needs some doctor's appointments, right? I'm going to suck at work because my mom is going to be my focus for the week. And that's just the way it's going to be. And I'm okay with that, you know? Sometimes I'm, you know, according to Violet, I'm a fantastic nurturing mother. Other times I'm a mom-shaped thing in the house, you know? And so and I'm like, okay, you know, that's all right. You know, it's a long game. All of it is a long game. I don't know how to answer that question either.
No, I totally understand. I think we all just, you know, rinse, wash, repeat. You know, I think we just kind of figure it out as we go along in life. Is there anything that companies should be doing to help their female employees or support women when it comes to imposter syndrome?
I mean, I think listening, I think when Amanda used that example of saying, this is not, no one person can do this job, they're
Mm-hmm.
faced with an opportunity to say, yes, they can, and you're obviously not the right person for the job. Or they can say, that's really interesting feedback. Maybe we need
Mm-hmm.
to look at this description again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The other thing is we know that men have a tendency to be very overconfident. I mean, that also studies have shown that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes arrogant. And there are actually studies that arrogance and overconfidence are, quote, inversely related to leadership talent.
Mm-hmm.
So companies need to be, you need to be more aware when you're hiring a person. They may be overconfident.
Mm-hmm.
They may be arrogant, but that doesn't mean they're good at what they do. And in fact, we all know, we've sat at tables with people and you're like, you are completely talking out of your arse right now. You make twice my salary. And right. And it's like what Michelle Obama said too. She's like, I've been at some of the most powerful tables in the world and they're not that smart.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think hiring people need to recognize their own biases and who they reward, hire, promote, and pay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. That's so funny when you think about sitting at a table and you listen to someone. I'm like, it's amazing. You can even brush your teeth in the morning. like you're a miracle. So
Miracle.
It is funny though, because you're looking at them like, what evidence do you have to support that?
Right.
What are you talking about?
Right. It's like, and you found that where? So yeah, I totally get it. I totally get it. So let me ask you something, because we have the time is going really, really fast. So in the few minutes we have left, we have a couple, but I'd love to talk about what resonates with you, because doing some research on LinkedIn, we found like 5 different types of imposter syndrome. There's the expert, the superwoman, the perfectionist, the soloist, and the natural genius. And so, without going into too much detail with respect to definitions of each of those categories, I think they're pretty self-explanatory. Is there one that resonates with you the most, that you find yourself feeling or falling into at times? The expert, the superwoman, the perfectionist, the soloist, or the natural genius?
Superwoman.
Superwoman? And why is that?
It goes back to what I said earlier. It's when you have so many hats and it's all so exhausting,
Mm-hmm.
and but you're expected to be delivering in every single one of these areas. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not, it kind of goes back to what Amanda said. It's not possible. No one person can do this job perfectly. So maybe there's a little bit of the perfectionist in there too,
Mm-hmm.
but you just got to show up for the job.
Right. Right.
I don't know. I'm just trying to survive here. Just not the vibe you're getting.
But that's what you should be saying. I don't know all the answers.
Right.
Right?
Right.
That's what we're here to talk about.
Right. I'm just trying to make ends meet. That's
Mine would be perfectionist.
Perfectionist.
I've been trying. I mean, that's been a lifelong process.
Mm-hmm.
I think it had to do a lot with growing up religious. But that's something I've been fighting about. I won't start something if I don't think I'm going to be great at it. So I just sit there and, I'm like, nope, I can't write as well as, Virginia Woolf. So I'm not going to write today. Why am I comparing myself to one of the most exceptional human beings, in the world?
On the planet, yeah.
I know, right? Which is stupid, because I know I'm nowhere in her league, but I just get paralyzed by, oh my God,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not that good. I can't do this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. They say that some of the ways to overcome imposter syndrome is to celebrate your wins, both big and small. And so if you could name 2 more ways, besides celebrating our wins, big and small, what else can we do as women, or what advice can you give to women out there to overcome their struggles with imposter syndrome?
Vulnerability.
Be vulnerable. That's a good one.
Is one. Right? Because the more we hear, oh, everybody's struggling with this, it's not just me. What about you, Amanda?
Well, I was thinking that maybe there's some consolation in the fact that the better you get at something, the more you doubt your abilities. So realize that the reason you're even feeling this is because you're good at what you do. Because if you weren't good at what you did, you wouldn't even realize you weren't good at what you did. Right. So I do think that's something one way to think about it.
Does that go back into that know your worth, know your value, know
Right.
you?
Right. And then like Maya Angelou said, like something like, I've written 11 books, and every time I put a new one out, I think, oh my God, they're going to find out now. Maya Angelou felt imposter syndrome. What the heck, you know?
Right.
And also to try and figure out, do I really need to blame myself here, or is there something going on in my environment that is contributing to this?
Mhm.
Denise, I would love to hear your perspective about that as a Black woman.
How much time Selena's gonna kill me. How much time do we have left?
Maybe that's a whole other conversation, but a lot of women of color have fought back against the original study because it was of affluent white women.
Yeah, I think that's a conversation for another day, but one I would love to have, because there are some distinct differences with respect to allowing yourself to be vulnerable and what that says about you as a Black woman, because there's some permissions we're just not granted, and some things we just don't do because of how they could be misinterpreted or perceived. I know recently, without going into too much, recently I was very frustrated, and an array of reasons. And I remember saying, people are going to think that I'm coming across as that ABW, and I'm not. I'm struggling, and so this is how I'm expressing myself, but it's going to be misconstrued. But I'm really fighting with something personal inside of me that's preventing me from moving forward like I think I should be. So yeah, but I would love to talk about that at another date, and when we have more time, because it's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
For real. In the few minutes we have left, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Indie Maven and Maven Space. I just have to, because I feel like you are over with what you're doing with Indie Maven and Maven Space. I feel like you're saving women. I think that you're saving us from ourselves and saving us from the issues and challenges that society places on us as women, and giving us a place to come together as one. And so can you talk a little bit about the mission and vision of Indie Maven and Maven Space while we're together today? I would love for people to learn more about this.
Amanda, can you speak to that original vision quickly?
The original vision, Leslie and I worked at Indie Star together, and we tried to accomplish a lot of things that systemically we were unable to, so we had and our thing was, we say this a lot, when women were covered in the news and they made the front page, they were either victims of crime or they were serving in some traditional role. Here's a mom at the Pacers game with a kid on her lap, And so we were like, no one's covering the in-between, and we need to do that. So that's where that started.
Yeah. So that kind of had the storytelling, but what was really fascinating was that it was not supposed to be a community originally. It was just supposed to be media and journalism, right? And storytelling. And then it very quickly, I think, because women were seeking community, that is what it became. And now that's really the primary driver. Like, the storytelling supports the community element of it. And the events, we have monthly events. Oh, we have more than monthly events. But then that's where Maven Space came into play too, is having a physical space, right? Because a lot of times we talk about women not having the just space in society, but also not having, a man came in here once and said, how come there aren't spaces like this for men? I was like, oh, that's the whole rest of the world.
Right.
So like, can we just have this?
Right.
And so that's kind of how that came to be. But still, that mission of the uplifting the voices and the storytelling, and just making sure that we have a safe, comfortable space to do that in person as well.
So,
and Denise, thank you for recognizing that vision. You were on our board in the beginning, and you're one of my favorite agency people in this town. And when I found out you started Art and Soul, I was like, what the heck? I mean, you have a legacy in this town, and I want to make sure we give you a shout out as well.
Thank you. That's so kind of you, but not necessary. This is really about you. Thank you. Let me not be an imposter. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm getting the wrap up sign from Selena. And so, but I do want to give you all a chance to make some final comments as we close things out. But if there's I'd love to hear anything else you'd like to add about imposter syndrome, advice, counsel, wisdom, anything that you want to leave our listeners with.
I just thank you for having these conversations, because They're not always easy to have. And to your point, it's a different experience for all of us to have them. But I think the important thing is that we're having the conversation, and that's the place to start. So I just thank you for having a space for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Agreed. I don't have anything else to add to that.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you all so much for having this conversation with me. I am truly, truly appreciative. And I really appreciate you joining me for this conversation. So I'm getting some direction from Selena backstage that I need to pull you all out. So Amanda, I'm going to say goodbye to you first. Thank you so much for joining me today. And Leslie, thank you as well. I really appreciate you. And to everyone else that's watching, thank you so much for joining us today on our episode of How They See Us, where we unpack imposter syndrome. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Also, I want to take a moment to thank Selena Coles, who is our account manager at Herd Strategies. She serves as our producer. And so I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you to her. She's the one that puts all this together and makes sure that we follow her time directions and her script and her questions that she's outlined. So thank you, Selena, for your hard work. So I'll look forward to seeing you all the next time, next month, during our next episode of How They See Us. Thank you for tuning in.